All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us today. I did just turn on the recording, so I do want to make you aware that we are recording this webinar and all the webinars this spring for people who aren't able to attend live. That way the resource can be available for people, and we'll post it on the Child Study Center website, and all of them will be housed on the Child Study Center's YouTube for future reference. And I raised that just in case you have anything that you do not want to, be shared and posted online. Just be mindful of that for the Q&A and chat. So my name is Dr. Rosanna Breaux. I'm the director of the Child Study Center and an assistant professor in the Department of Psychology. And it's my pleasure to also welcome Dr. Sam Margherio, another assistant professor in the Department of Psychology, and we'll be co-leading today's webinar. And hopefully we'll have some time at the end where people can be able to ask some more individualized questions as well about your child. So I'm going to let Dr. Margherio take it away.
Thank you so much, Dr. Breaux. So hi, everyone. Today, we are going to be talking about organization, time management, and planning strategies to help your child get their homework accomplished. And so I want to start us off by pausing and thinking about when you learned about your own organization, time management, and planning skills. Who taught you? If you're like me, you might be sitting here thinking, no one really taught me, right? And so for many of us, it is assumed that we kind of develop these things over time. And for some youth, their brain development allows their frontal lobe and their executive functioning skills to develop kind of over time. They might learn by observing adults or maybe by trial and error. But as demands are increasing academically, thinking like once we start getting into multiple subjects in one day, maybe having a locker, things like that, those kids are ready to handle it because they've kind of innately developed these skills. And then there's all the other youth who aren't developing these just by trial and error observation. And that's really, really common. And so today we want to be thinking about what we can do for these kiddos for whom these skills don't come naturally. Because as they progress through school, these demands for organization, time management, and planning will keep increasing without the requisite skills. And we'll start to see a bigger disparity between what's expected of them and what their skill level is. And in that space can create frustration for teachers, caregivers, and the kids themselves. And so specifically when that happens, what we might see as a caregiver or as a teacher is that the child is having trouble completing their homework. And that might look like getting really frustrated, lots of missed assignments, maybe refusing or avoiding to do work. And unfortunately for these kiddos, they might get labeled with unhelpful terms like lazy or unmotivated, when in reality, there's so much going on beneath the surface that we can't see that is contributing to their trouble doing homework. So for example, for kids who have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder or ADHD, we know that there are often challenges with time perception. And that can translate to trouble knowing how much time has passed, as well as trouble knowing how long tasks will take. So for example, a kid might be working on something, or maybe they got a little bit distracted playing video games, and then suddenly it's midnight and they haven't even started or done their next task. We also know that kiddos with ADHD will often have trouble with working memory, and that can manifest as challenges we're calling time-based information, such as knowing that tomorrow is when something is due, or I have a quiz in 2 days. It can also look like trouble ordering events in time. Things like knowing that I need to accomplish this task before I can go on to this task, before I can go on to this task. And ultimately, all of these challenges can create trouble completing our homework and our academics. And we might get into a pattern where for these kiddos, the only attention they get about school is really negative. And we might begin this cycle of negative self-evaluation, which then is going to make it even harder to get the motivation or confidence to complete their homework. So there's a lot going on beneath the surface that we want to be thinking about when we see a child having trouble completing their homework. And we'll talk about some more of those specific steps today. Dr. Rosanna Breaux is going to talk to us about what it takes to actually complete homework.
All right. So everyone, has experienced homework to a certain extent. It often looks a little bit different now in the post-COVID era, but data suggests that students spend approximately 1 hour of after-school time on average on homework each day. Of course, this number differs drastically from elementary school to high school and from student to student, depending on factors like how much time they have during the school day to be able to work on homework assignments, as well as what types of classes they're taking. And while homework is commonplace for students and their families, supporting them in completing their homework, we know that nearly every family from one time to another are going to have a child who experiences problems related to homework. And this is especially true for families of children with disabilities like ADHD, as Dr. Margherio was just talking about, but also for children experiencing depression, anxiety, or specific learning disorders. All right, so take a moment and think. What steps does it take in order for your child to be able to turn in a homework assignment? If you want, you can put some of these in the chat, or you can just be thinking about what your child has to do, whether it's turning something in person, turning it in online. All right, so we often don't realize how many steps are involved. Oh, someone just alerted me that the chat is disabled. Thank you. Thought I turned it on, but let's see. Well, rather than wasting time, because it's showing up as enabled on my end, we'll keep moving with, I think you can use the Q&A feature for now, and I will be using that as well later on. So what I'll do is I'll dismiss these ones that are here. And then if you do have questions that come on later on. So yes, if you have questions, thank you for raising that. You can put them in here now and we'll get to them at the end. You can also at the end when we open it up for Q&A, post questions at that time. All right, so we're thinking about the steps in the homework assignment and in the homework cycle. Hopefully you've been thinking about some of these. People are often surprised that there are more steps in the homework completion cycle than we realize or think about. And so what this means is that in order for a homework assignment to be turned back in, students not only need to attend to the teacher assigning the work, but they need to then accurately record what the assignment is, or ensure that they have the materials needed for the homework, even if the homework assignment gets posted online for them to see. If they're not bringing home what they need and they're seeing it after the fact, that doesn't really work. Then once they actually get home, in order for them to complete homework, study for tests that might be coming up, or working on larger projects, they need to be able to manage their time efficiently after school while they're actually working on that homework, to be able to study effectively in order to complete the work. And then once they've actually done the work, hopefully in a somewhat effective or efficient manner, they need to then put those materials back into their book bag in order to remember to bring it back to school, and then actually remember to turn it in. Or if it's turning it in online, remember to actually upload it and submit it online. And while that might seem easier said than done, this means that there are a lot of different places along this cycle where things can go wrong. Students often start to have difficulty with one or more of these various steps in middle school, although for some we'll see it even earlier. And unfortunately, we know that middle school is when academic demands tend to increase. Students often have more teachers or rooms that they have to navigate at this time, and they're often expected to complete their homework and study much more independently relative to elementary school, when they might be, having parents or caregivers who are much more hands-on, or going to an after-school program where they have some more support for completing their homework. Our goal throughout today's webinar is to touch on a couple different strategies that are evidence-based to help with organization, time management, and planning to overcome some of the common issues in these various steps of the homework completion cycle. If you're lucky enough to have one or more children in your family who maybe don't have difficulties with completing the homework cycle, it's still really nice to use some of these strategies to encourage the use of efficient and effective homework practices, and this can help prevent problems from developing and ensure that your child's able to perform to their fullest potential, particularly in those transition periods to middle school or high school. All right, so we're going to start off with organization. And we know that some students have difficulty organizing materials for their homework. This may be that they misplace assignments or fail to bring the materials they need, like books, home from school, or they may fail to return those completed assignments or upload those completed assignments online. And these issues align with steps 2 and 6 in that figure that we just saw on the last slide. So now we're going to talk about some really basic organizational systems. Later at the end of the webinar, we'll also talk about some healthy homework habits related to organization within the home environment that can also help with homework completion. So one of the most basic but often overlooked organizational strategies is the use of a 2-pocket folder. This is where we know that the materials can be organized and placed directly where they need to go, rather than getting misplaced within a larger binder or crumpled up and folded in the bottom of their backpack. And this is simply where assignments that need to be taken home can get placed on the left side, for example, and completed homework that needs to go back to school and be turned in gets put on the right side. In this system, what's really important is that handouts, class notes, other things that are not homework do not go in the homework 2-pocket folder. They are filed separately, either in separate class folders or within a 3-ring binder. And we'll talk about some of the different organization systems, or within a tab of an accordion binder, but we'll get there in just a moment. So for younger kids, this 2-pocket folder looks just like what I was just describing, and they probably only need one folder, such as these 2 examples you see here. For older children and adolescents, it might be that you want to have one 2-pocket folder for each class, and using a color-coded system, you'll notice this theme throughout some of what I'm going to be touching on, so that they know quickly just by looking, oh, my blue folder's for math, and then they can grab their blue binder or their blue notebook as well. And that can just really help with organization, especially at the end of the day rush, packing up backpacks to head to the school bus. What's also really nice now with, students using Microsoft Teams or Google, they can also use the same color coding system online that they use with their physical material. So they can actually color code the individual tabs where they're saving materials, or where they might keep their class notes online. And this can also be used if they end up using a physical planner, or use an online calendar like iCal or Google Calendar, where when they block off time to be working on certain tasks, they can associate it with a particular subject based off of the color. And that's a really nice way to help increase awareness about time management and how much time they're spending on particular tasks or particular subjects. So then when we think about binder organization system, I really want to just start off by saying there's no one right way to organize school materials. I'm going to touch on 3 common ones here and discuss, which age groups or which types of students these different approaches may be best for, but you know your child best. And you also really need to think about the fact that different systems might be necessary at different points in time, based on what the expectations are for a given teacher. So one of the common themes we're going to have here is the importance of flexibility, but also communication around expectations with your teacher, with your child's teacher or teachers. So the first one we'll touch on is the accordion binder. What's really nice about accordion binders is that they eliminate the 3 rings that are present in traditional binders, which make them a lot easier to quickly move papers in and out of the various sections or tabs. This can also help remove the step of needing to 3-hole punch handouts, which often is part of what leads to handouts or notes getting crumpled up and ending up in the bottom of a backpack or lost entirely. Accordion binders are particularly helpful for elementary school age children, and this can be a really nice way to help them learn and build organizational skills related to managing their class materials and assignments. But we know that this can continue to be helpful for middle school students, especially those who might struggle with organization or having different materials for different classes, because it keeps everything in one place. Setting up an accordion binder can be really simple and again should be customized based off of what tools your child is using. But generally, you either can insert that 2-pocket folder right in the first tab, or if you want to use the first and second tab, one is like a homework to do, one is a homework to hand in section. This gets at the same idea though that we were just talking about. Then each of the remaining tabs would be designated to each class or subject that your child has. You can also have a spot for your child's planner if they use a physical planner. You can also put in, if you have one of the, either like a Ziploc bag or the nice little pouches full of pens, pencils, highlighters, whatever writing materials that they might need or that the teacher has asked you to have available for your child. This way, everything is organized and in one spot, and they know and it's clearly labeled where the materials need to go back to. This can be very similar for using one large 3-ring binder. And again, this is more common in middle school and high school. Although depending on, the types of classes, students taking honors and AP classes often feel like they can't keep it all in one place. Having multiple different smaller 3-ring binders can be really helpful. And so I'm going to kind of talk through strategies for using either one large or multiple small 3-ring binders. Similar to what I was just saying with the accordion binder, with a large 3-ring binder, this can serve as kind of a one-stop shop. You can have, as you see in the picture, one of those pouches that has all of their writing utensils, things that they might need. Ideally, you can even have a 3-hole punch that's right in the front so that they can 3-hole punch handouts or homework assignments and put them in the correct tab as soon as they receive them so that they don't get lost. Again, with the color coding system, you ideally would either have different color tabs, or if you have all like manila folders, you can use different color markers or pens to label each of the tabs for the different subject areas, just to really help with visually quickly seeing where things need to go rather than needing to kind of flip to each tab to try to remember what it is. That's particularly important because we know individuals with ADHD, individuals with specific learning or disorders often struggle with working memory or holding those pieces of information in their mind. And so whatever we can do to help with those frontal lobe executive functioning deficits is really important. For older students like high schoolers, as I mentioned, or if you have, an elementary middle schooler who seems to struggle less with organization, it might be that you want to use those multiple different smaller 3-hole binders, one for each subject. Sometimes students will then have small notebooks, with matching colors that can go in each of those binders for taking notes, or you can put loose leaf paper in either the 3-ring as you see, the large 3-ring as you see in the picture, or within each of those smaller binders. This is really, if we're thinking about it for the smaller binders, this should be used for notes and for handouts. having a homework folder, if you're having multiple binders, is really helpful. Either, again, a different color one that goes in the front of each one of those notebooks, or one individual homework folder. So let's bring this all together, because I know I just said a lot of different things really quickly, but the steps for creating and implementing an organization system like this are pretty simple, but we need to provide support. I always talk about parents and teachers being the external frontal lobe for young kids while they're still building up these skills. And so using things like visual reminders, so this can be a note card that gets kind of pinned into their backpack, or a piece of paper that can go right in the clear pocket of their binder to help remind them where materials go, as well as what steps they need to go through, what things they need to check to make sure that they have everything that they need at the end of the day. For younger children, you can also talk with their teacher to see, can they give verbal reminders about what they need to do and where things need to go. Or you could also see about implementing what's called a buddy system, which is typically where the teacher will pair up a friend or someone else who maybe seems to be doing well with remembering homework, and pair them up with your child to make sure that they have what they need at the end of the day. Sometimes teachers are great and they do this classroom wide, and are really strategic about how they do those pairings. Second, it can be helpful for parents to have their children regularly go through and check, and you can kind of coach and model this organization system. So generally you recommend daily, or at least every other day, that you're going through and checking on those binders and book bags after school and making sure that things are correctly filed away, and then checking the larger organizational system each week. That can be really nice to do on Sundays, to make sure that they're prepared for the school week ahead, or if your family tends to try to get things done on Saturday so you can enjoy the weekend and relax. This can be really simple, just sitting down and saying, let's go through your binder or backpack, and then you'll organize paper by paper, section by section, to put back anything that's been misfiled. Some papers might just get thrown out because they're no longer relevant or needed. Other papers might need to be moved to a box or another binder that you might keep at home. That's for papers that you want to keep, but that shouldn't be going back and forth between school and home every day. The goal with time is to move your child to being able to do this on their own, or only with a prompt of hey, did you clean out your backpack for the week, rather than you needing to coach them through and help them with each of these steps. While these strategies are evidence-based, we know that for some students who really might struggle with implementing them, like students with ADHD, it can be really necessary and critical to the success of this system to be able to use some sort of reward system to help reinforce and help with motivation. So this could be where they earn points or stars for every time that they're able to follow through whatever the system is that you created. And that can then be used to earn different privileges, like being able to have an extra hour of electronic time on the weekend, or being able to pick, what movie the family watches, or a special treat for their lunch, for example. And the final thing I just want to highlight before we move on to some strategies related to planning is that this is not a one-size-fits-all. You are likely going to need to problem solve with your child, with your child's teacher. Something that might work great one year might not work all of a sudden, when they switch to third grade and have a new teacher with different sets of expectations on how they hand in their homework. Generally, we've seen a lot of issues, with students related to online that might not even make sense, or it's harder for parents to check because middle school, high school students might say oh yeah, I did that. Yeah, I turned that in. And you're not able to actually access and monitor until you hear from the teacher they have all zeros and haven't turned in any homework assignments for the year. And so really trying to think and work with the system that you have to identify where the problems are and come up with strategies to address those. All right, and I'm going to hand it back over to Dr. Margherio, who'll be talking about homework planning.
Thank you, Dr. Breaux. Okay. So now we're organized, and as any of us know, that can be kind of half the battle, right? But that's not the whole story. We want to also talk about what we can do to help your child be successful once they're organized and then sitting down to do their homework. Okay. So Homework planning is a very important piece to work with kiddos who are neurodivergent or coming in with a disability, because as Dr. Breaux pointed out earlier, doing your homework may sound like one task, but really there's a lot of different pieces that go into that. And so it wouldn't be appropriate to ask one of these kiddos to just, all right, go do your homework. There's so much going on there. And so we want to take all of those tasks that go into doing your homework, and we want to plan for them. We want to get them out of our brain onto a piece of paper so we can plan appropriately. So with this, we are going to use a tried and true strategy of making a list, starting out with a list of all of the tasks that need to be done. And we're going to do this homework plan. We're going to create this homework plan in collaboration with our child, especially as they get older, and we can rely on them a little bit more to bring that independence into their own planning process. And again, we're going to make sure that we are writing these things down. And that may look differently for different kids. So for some kids, that may be a list. Some kids maybe more need visual reminders. And so maybe we're using stickers or a colorful planner. And for some kids, we could also even make like an auditory list. You know, we're making a recording on our phone on the drive home from school, for example. So again, the first step is going to be writing down or identifying all of our homework tasks. Now you may be looking at me going, Dr. Margherio, when I ask my child what they have for homework, they look at me like I'm crazy and say nothing. And that's a common experience because again, there's a lot that happened in their day. And so rather than just asking, hey, what do you have for homework? For some kids, we need to be a little bit more specific and use different strategies. So for example, we may walk through their day with them. Okay, what subject do you have first? All right, what did your teacher tell you we needed to do in that subject? Or we may use just go by subject. All right, what about math? What about social studies? And go through each subject like that. Or we may go kind of type of homework by type of homework. So we might ask, what readings do you have to do tonight? What upcoming quizzes do you have? And we want to facilitate this to the degree that we can by using the information that's already available. So for younger kiddos, it may be that they already coming home with a planner that the teacher sends home, for example, or we may have an online platform where we can communicate with school and see updates about the tasks that are available. Or we're using the organization system that Dr. Breaux laid out for us, where we have a planner already embedded in that. So when you use additional supports and carefully craft our questions to get more fine-tuned detail about what the child has to do that day beyond what do you have for homework. Once we have that list, we want to help that child develop a sense of time perception and planning skills by estimating how long that task will take. This is especially appropriate for younger kids. And so we might ask them, for example, you have a reading assignment and you have to read a chapter. About how long do you think that will take? And we might help guide them. So if they say 10 minutes, but as the caregiver, you know better than that, it's okay to say, okay, how about we estimate maybe half an hour? Once you have your list and you know about how long they'll take, then you will prioritize the tasks and you'll go through and prioritize each task on that list, each item that's been identified. We'll talk more specifically about how to do that in just a moment. And then for step 4, we want to make sure that we're not over planning. So we want to make sure that the list that we create isn't too daunting or seeming like totally unmanageable for our kids. And so it might be okay to ask them, hey, what's something else you want to do tonight? And kind of plan for a reward in that way, plan for breaks. This is an example of a homework plan that you could develop, especially for an older kid, like someone in middle school or high school, where again, you're going to identify each of the homework tasks to be completed. In this example, we did so by domain, so the tests and quizzes to study for, the long-term projects, etc. You'll note here that it includes both what needs to be done tonight and what we need to be thinking about more long-term. Again, for kiddos coming in with ADHD, learning challenges, and other forms of neurodiversity, it can be really difficult to think in that longer term and plan ahead. And so we want to be prompting our child and asking, okay, what quizzes do you have upcoming? What tests? What are longer term projects that maybe aren't due tomorrow, but let's not get the rush the night before and only work on it then. And again, once you have that list, and you're checking with any type of online communication platform or daily planner systems, then we can go through with our older children and say, okay, and about how long do we think this will take? Trying our best to be realistic. I will say, I'm a faculty member, I have a PhD, and I get that one wrong all the time. I overestimate my abilities in a short amount of time, every time, but this helps us give us that feedback so we can plan better in the future. And then we will prioritize. And so we have this order column over to the far left side that will tell us, okay, what's the first thing I need to get done? The second thing, the third thing, so that every item on that list has a number by it. This part can be tricky, but some things we want to think about when we're coming up with the priority list is, okay, what is due the soonest? So is there something that's due tomorrow that we really need to make sure that we're getting taken care of? But we don't just want to think about that. We also want to ask our child, what on this list do you feel good about? Do you feel confident that you can start with? For some kiddos, it may be okay to actually put that at the top of the list so that starting with the homework isn't an incredibly daunting process. And it's something that the child agrees they can tackle first. And then in addition to that, we want to be thinking about, and what out of these are worth a lot of my grade? So, spending more time maybe with the ones that are worth a lot of my grade. And there's no clear-cut rule for, all right, you should prioritize like this, 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 and this. We want to be thinking about your child and the current situation that they're in. For some kiddos, we might again put the tasks that they think are manageable up front so that we can ease them into homework. If a child is failing a grade or failing a subject, we might be prioritizing that subject more highly. But I would recommend trying not to plan for homework in a way that creates a really uncomfortable space for your child where it's, all right, the subject I really dislike or feel really not confident in, followed by the next subject that I really don't like and also don't feel confident in, and so forth. If there's ways that we can kind of integrate things that they think they can tackle, things they have confidence in, and sprinkle those throughout, that can be helpful. So let's put it all together. So again, we're coming into the space already organized. And for our plan, we're going to go through some type of process where we identify all of the homework tasks to be completed. I recommend doing this daily because if you do this weekly, it can be very daunting and seem unmanageable. If daily isn't working for you, maybe we just try twice a week, checking in on Monday, checking in on Wednesday, for example. And finding time to do this. It can be something as simple as on the drive home from school. Again, maybe you're making an auditory list as you're going. Or once you get home, maybe you have a dry erase board where you're marking all the things that they tell you they have on their to-do list for the evening. Once we have that list, for older children, we'll talk to them about, all right, and about how long is that going to take? For younger children, we might be doing that ourselves as the caregiver, knowing, okay, they have to read for 20 minutes and they have to do their math, and I know it typically takes them this long, things like that. And we can revise this list as we go. Then we will prioritize the tasks so that every item has a priority number by it. So there should be a number telling you exactly when we would do that task within our homework plan for every item on that plan. And again, there's no clear-cut right or wrong answer about how we do this, but we want to consider factors like due dates, the grade value, and your child's confidence with the task. And we want to revise this plan as needed. So maybe we're learning again that for our child, if we start with biology homework, things aren't going to go well. And so even if that's due the next day, maybe we're starting with something else, but we're going to keep revising our approach to this as needed. Again, for some kids, we might learn that we need to make their list more visual. Maybe they're the one who needs to write it down on the dry erase board, or they need like visual reminders with stickers to show them what subject we'll be working on, for example. whatever works best for you, and communicating with the teachers along the process. Again, you and the teacher can be that frontal lobe for your child, communicating together about what is due, and getting that feedback. Is this homework plan working? Are we still seeing a lot of missed assignments? Are there certain subjects where it's happening more? How can we work with that teacher to fill that gap? But if you're like me and you start your week with this to-do list, that can only get us so far. And what is really important then is how we actually are managing our time to be able to accomplish the tasks on that to-do list. I was once told, and it's stuck with me since, that instead of time management, we should really be thinking about this as self-management and time awareness. We can't physically manage time, but we can manage ourselves and what we do with ourselves in a specific period of time. And we want to help guide our children to get to the point where that becomes a little bit easier. And there's a lot of things that we can do to help support them. One of the most important things that we can do is to change our expectations and definitions of what a task is and what completing a task is. So if my expectation is that, okay, the task is do your homework, I will inevitably be frustrated when the task doesn't get completed. And the child will be frustrated, and it can create some negative attention, and it can just be a challenge all around. But if I redefine what completing a task is, I'm more likely to be satisfied, and so is the child. And again, create a more positive interaction for us. So we want to take these big tasks and we want to break them down until they start to seem manageable for our child. So for example, we might tell our child, or what might be on the homework plan is that they have to write an essay. Well, writing an essay is actually a really big task, right? There's a ton to do there. And again, if you're like me, if you know you have to write an essay, you might sit there kind of spinning your wheels for a while. So instead of that being the task that we're going to complete, we might break that down a little bit smaller, and we can do this collaboratively with our child and say, okay, that's a big task. What's something that seems more manageable for you? Something that you would feel more confident that you could complete? And we might get to, okay, well, let's actually write the first paragraph. And that's great. And for some kids, that's still going to seem like a lot of work and not so manageable. We can break that down even smaller. What if we write the first paragraph, or excuse me, the first sentence of the paragraph? That might start to seem more manageable and make us feel like we can be successful. And as the caregiver, it can help us, again, be more satisfied because we can actually check that box. They completed a task. It may not be writing the whole essay, but it is what we set out to do. And we often find that once people get started, it's a lot easier to keep going. And again, you can have your child try this. Think of a homework assignment that they're not looking forward to, and have them break it down into smaller and smaller pieces until it's something they feel like they can get started on. So for another example, how many of us have told our children at some point, finish your homework? Again, that's a big task with lots of pieces. So maybe a smaller task is finish your math homework. Okay, we're getting there. But an even smaller task could be work on your math homework for 5 minutes. We can use time increments to signal what our task is. Work on X, work on this assignment for this long. And that might be something that a child can get behind. You'll notice I have 5 minutes on here, which may seem like a really short amount of time, but we want to match whatever our expectation is with what we already know our child's attention span is. So we don't want to set them up for failure with this task. If we tell any child, all right, work on this for an hour, we're probably not going to be successful. So we want to match what their attention span is, what they think is manageable for this task. When we chunk things into time, this is really similar to what you may have heard of as what I call the tomato timer or the Pomodoro technique. But it's when we choose a task to be completed and we set a timer, a visual timer. Visual timers help us externalize time, which helps with time perception. We set some type of visual timer for a time that we agree upon. And they work until that timer is up. And then we would put a check mark or next to that task on our homework plan or on our task list so that we get that little bit of celebration. And then we take an enjoyable break. So we want to carefully craft these breaks so that they can be time limited and not set us up for failure. So saying go play video games for 5 minutes probably isn't a good break because ending that after 5 minutes is going to be really difficult. But, go play with the dog for 5 minutes, go take a walk, grab a snack, little things for a brief, enjoyable break. We want to pair that with our praise and amping it up. And we want to repeat that cycle, and we can take a longer break after about 4 of those. Right? Lots of things. Let's put it all together. So the first thing in time management is let's break our tasks down into manageable steps. Let's change our expectation for what it means to complete a task. Engage your child in this and break it down until it feels manageable. This may be time-based, so work for 5 minutes, for example. The child's going to engage in the task, and we want to remind ourselves that even the tiniest steps is still progress. Progress, not perfection. We'll take breaks after they've completed the task. And we'll give them lots of praise for completing it. Again, we want to reverse that negative attention cycle that a lot of these kids have been in with school, where the only attention that they're getting, or most of the attention that they're getting about schoolwork, is really negative. We want to start reversing that. All right, now we amplify the praise. We give them tons of praise, even for working for 5 minutes. Great. Let's give them all the praise. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for sitting still for 5 minutes. Thank you so much for completing this. Give them that sense of accomplishment. And then we'll start this process all over again. Now, Dr. Breaux is going to talk to us about general healthy homework habits.
All right. So yes, this is the last part. So in addition to these various different strategies that we've discussed, we're going to end by discussing some of these more global healthy homework habits that can both help with prevention of problems proactively, but also that are critical when your child is already struggling with homework. We'll end with some resources and then hopefully have about 10 minutes or so for Q&A at the end. All right. So first and foremost, it's important to establish clear expectations around homework. This is a lot of what Dr. Margherio was just talking about. One of the things that can be really helpful in doing that is talking to your child's teacher and knowing how they're going to communicate information about homework and exams. Is this going to be verbally? Is this going to be posted in the top corner of the board? Is this going to be posted online? Will you as the parent have access if it is online? But it's also really important to know how much time your teacher is expecting homework to take each night. And this both helps with establishing realistic expectations and determining what those goals and tasks should be in terms of how much homework should be completing, but also can help identify problems. If your child is taking much longer than the teacher saying this homework should be, that could be an indication that there's a problem, be it with attention or struggling with actually that subject material itself. Additionally, it's important to establish a routine and clear expectations around homework completion. As much as you can, try to provide structure and a day-to-day routine for completing homework, because we know that this consistency can help homework completion be done more efficiently. Ideally, you would identify a time frame where your child's able to do homework at the same time each day. Maybe they come home from school at 4, they take a half-hour break and have a snack, and then they start homework at 4:30. Generally, it's best if they can be starting by 5 p.m. at the latest. We know that after a long, exhausting day, all of our brains start to turn off and we're more easily distracted. That said, I am quite aware as a parent and as a clinician that extracurriculars and after-school activities definitely can make that more challenging on a given day. And so some strategies to kind of help balance those two things could be maybe have two different routines, one for when they have extracurriculars on a given day, one for when they don't, and also taking a look at your family's own schedule and how many extracurriculars and what's going on. Because if you're having something every single day, that might be too much, and the expectations might not be realistic for your child right now while they're still building these skills. And so again, as Dr. Margherio said, our goal is to help set our child up for success and working as a team and having lines of communication with the teacher, as well as setting those clear expectations with your child can help proactively. Related to this, as much as we can have a conducive and supportive environment at home, which what I mean by that is a place where they're able to consistently complete their homework, ideally with minimal distractions, where a parent or some sort of caregiver, be it a babysitter, grandparent, aunt, uncle, older sibling can be around both to kind of monitor the child, answer questions as needed, provide that praise for completing it. Oftentimes a kitchen table or a dining room table can work really well for this if you don't have like a designated desk or work area. The big thing to keep in mind if you're in one of those more common spaces is that there could be distractions like a partially built puzzle or Legos nearby or TV that's on in the background, but that could be heard. And we want to try to limit those as much as possible because those are going to be distracting for anyone, but especially for children with attentional problems or who are struggling academically. For younger children, you're very likely going to need to be available to help get them started with that homework. Even for kids who love school, playing or eating is going to be a more enjoyable activity typically than doing homework. And so that transition can be hard. So as Dr. Margherio was just talking about, really asking them what they have to do, helping them create a plan for which tasks they need to do, what they're going to start with, is going to be critical to setting them up for success. For older children, again, they might be able to do this on their own, but even in middle or high school, students with disabilities who struggle with organization, time management, and planning are likely going to need support here, especially with that initial getting started, but also with providing encouragement throughout. In general, for those children who are struggling with homework, it is helpful to make sure that you're nearby and able to kind of check in periodically. And that's where setting up those realistic 5-10 minute expectations can be helpful and give you that reason to be checking in and provide that praise and reinforcement rather than them feeling like you're just hovering or in their space or actually causing a source of distraction for them. But using that time when you are checking in, not to just be overanalyzing, did they get the work right, or correcting it, but instead to be providing praise for, wow, you've gotten halfway through the page. I know math is hard for you. I'm so proud of you for sticking with it for that 10 minutes. We tend to, as humans, adhere to and attend to things that are not going well. And for a child who's struggling with homework, we really want to flip that script and provide that praise and encouragement for what they are doing well. That said, you still do want to be available to review the homework when it is done. For some children and some families, and this differs parent to parent, family to family, but for some that is really checking accuracy, having them fix and replace things, especially if you have a child who maybe is inattentive, makes careless mistakes. But this can also be such a great opportunity for positive interaction around what they learned, trying to understand it, or just to provide that praise again for focus, task completion, or whatever it is that they're working to improve. The big theme here is that this needs to be tailored to your child and where they're at, and incrementally we can be increasing our expectations of what they're doing, but we want to be setting them up for success and setting goals that are realistic for them. So before we open it up for questions, if you want to continue learning about engaging with some of the different resources for implementing these organization, time management, and planning strategies we've discussed today, here are 3 great online publicly available resources. The first is called Tools. This is a series of videos that were created actually during the COVID-19 pandemic, but that continue to be highly relevant today. These were created at the University of Maryland's ADHD program, but they have a range of different really brief easy to access videos on calendar systems, creating a home workplace, prioritizing what's important, breaking down assignments and tasks, creating routines, addressing lack of motivation through behavioral activation, as well as tackling unhelpful thoughts that might be getting in the way. And these are available in English, Spanish, and Mandarin. So really nice resource that provides more of the content we've talked about today. Second one is Understood, which has lots of great resources for parents with articles on many different topics, but several that are related to what we've been talking about today. An example of one of these is executive function challenges and learning, 6 ways to help your middle schoolers. And this is a great resource for families of children with a range of disabilities, but particularly ADHD and specific learning disorders. And finally, and related to that, Attitude is another wonderful resource, but in particular, they have a free downloadable guide that both teachers and parents can use to help students with ADHD and learning disabilities with organizing their homework, their school schedules, even things around like medication management and to do that, as well as many other relevant topics that we couldn't talk about today. So with that, just ending with that wonderful reminder that this is a team effort and that communication and consistency are key to success. If you want to learn more about the Child Study Center, I have both our website and our Twitter handle there. We will be advertising when we post this recording, as well as the other upcoming webinars on the website, as well as on our Twitter. So at this time, I'm going to have Dr. Margherio come back up with me. And if you have questions, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A. Answered everything. All your problems are solved. Great. I also can turn off the recording for this part if that would be helpful. If parents would like to raise more individual ones, let me stop the recording.